This will help you grow big and strong. My loving in-laws, adoring their newly born grandchild, keep buying and bringing various things over. Today, my mother-in-law brought some baby food. However, considering I've just given birth, baby food seems a bit premature. They must really love their grandchild. Don't you think it's a bit too early? 4 or 5 months will fly by. Don't worry, it's in a sealed pack and has a long shelf life. I bought it online, it's really popular, and I was worried it might sell out when we need it. Thank you as always. Now, I'll be heading to my parents' house. I was just about to leave for my parents' house. When my mother-in-law arrived just as I was getting into the car, I decided not to go back inside the house and simply packed the baby food into my bag. Welcome back. I'll stay here for a bit and relax. I planned to stay overnight at my parents' house. The next day, when I casually showed the baby food from my mother-in-law to my mom, she exclaimed loudly, "This is from my mother-in-law. Baby food already, can you believe it? Throw this away right now." The baby food she pointed at had slightly changed color. My mother-in-law is usually very kind, but there was an incident not long ago that made me a bit suspicious. Seeing the discolored baby food, my suspicion grew. It seems like my mother-in-law might be targeting me. I resigned from my job at 28 when I got married. I could have continued working just for the sake of marriage, but I was already pregnant. Having wanted a child, I decided to quit my job to focus on raising my baby. However, I do want to work again, so once child-rearing settles down, I plan to look for a job. Since I'm 28 years old, I'll probably resume working after I'm over 30. At 30, I should still have opportunities for re-employment, right? Besides, I've saved up considering marriage and childbirth, and my husband, Jonathan, has been stable in his job for 10 years. So, even though the baby was a bit unplanned, scaling down the wedding and skipping the honeymoon made it seem manageable to quit my job for a while. I'm willing to make these sacrifices for my child. Jonathan understood my decision and supported me quitting my job. Getting married and pregnant simultaneously, I felt very happy starting a new life with my understanding husband. We were worried about how our parents and in-laws would react to our shotgun wedding, but they were happy when we announced it. My worrisome mom, Emily, was relieved to hear about the marriage, having feared I might never get married. "I'm glad you got married before 30. I was worried you might never find someone." Despite knowing about Jonathan, why was she so worried? Maybe I'll understand her feelings once I have my child. Linda and George, my in-laws, also responded well, being happy about our marriage and pregnancy. "Jonathan, it looks like you've married a wonderful person. Make sure to take good care of your wife and child. I'm going to be a grandpa. Let me know whatever you need. A crib? Clothes? Diapers?" "Dad, you're getting ahead of yourself." My in-laws were overjoyed about their first grandchild. Especially George, who, with his generous nature, was eager to buy everything. Linda happily watched on as George enthusiastically planned for the grandchild. I find their slightly old-fashioned relationship as a couple quite endearing. "Hello, how are you feeling? I know it must be hard to do housework with your growing belly. I've made some side dishes for you, have them for dinner tonight." "Linda, thank you so much. I really appreciate it." Our house is about a 40-minute drive from my in-laws. Despite the distance, my mother-in-law often checks on me and brings over homemade dishes. I've heard many people struggle with mother-in-law issues, but that seems foreign to me. At least, that's what I thought at the time. "Hey, are you okay? You seem to be having a hard time again." "I'm fine, just leave me alone for a bit, will you?" Lately, I've been unable to sleep well and get irritated over trivial things. As a result, I've been cold to my husband more often. It's probably because of the pregnancy, right? He seems to think so too and doesn't complain, treating me kindly even when I'm cold. But I can't rely on his kindness forever, so I discussed my insomnia and irritability with the doctor during a checkup. After the examination, they told me my insomnia was due to too much caffeine, and my irritability was a result of the lack of sleep. That can't be right. Caffeine can negatively affect fetal development and, in large amounts, may increase the risk of miscarriage or stillbirth. That's why, as a pregnant woman, I've been very careful about it. On the day I had the checkup, I told my husband, Jonathan, about it during dinner. They said it's because of too much caffeine, but I don't think that's possible. I always check the ingredients of the food I eat. Could it be in foods that don't have ingredient labels? Like vegetables or meat, maybe you're eating them without realizing? I checked that too. But none of the foods I've been eating had those ingredients. Since the cause was unclear, I might be unknowingly consuming caffeine even while eating dinner. That's when it struck me. Could it be? I always check the ingredients of what I eat, but I hadn't checked what was in the side dishes made by Linda, my mother-in-law. Could her dishes be the cause? But Linda always comes to check on me and brings dishes because she knows I'm having a hard time with household chores. For a moment, I doubted Linda, but I immediately dismissed such a terrible thought. You've been looking a bit under the weather lately. Why don't you go and rest at your parents' place? I've got a business trip next week and won't be home for a few days. You could stay there and take it easy for a while. Thank you, maybe I will. Jonathan really cares about me a lot. The next holiday, I went to my parents' house, driven by Jonathan. You look exhausted. Are you okay? Pregnancy is tough, right? I remember feeling the same when I was pregnant with you. I guess everyone goes through tough times during pregnancy. Hearing my mother's words, I realized that I wasn't the only one suffering during pregnancy, and it seemed to lighten my mood a bit. After having my mother take care of things around me and resting for a week, my health improved, and I returned home. A month later, I safely gave birth to a healthy baby. You did great. Congratulations, she's a beautiful girl. So this is my granddaughter. She's adorable. Not only Jonathan but also Linda and George, my in-laws, came to the hospital. George was so happy about his long-awaited grandchild that he even shed tears. It made me happy to see them so delighted. Although there were times I worried about my health after giving birth, both the baby and I were healthy, and we were able to leave the hospital in about a week. Now we're a family of 3. It's been a week since we brought our daughter home, and my in-laws, George and Linda, have been coming over almost every day. Moreover, George brings loads of gifts for our daughter each time. Our house is already full of unopened baby items. Got something delivered today, so I brought it over. Dad, you're buying too much. Besides, these clothes are still too big for her. Is that so? But it's better to have them than not, right? Don't sweat the small stuff. George loves shopping extravagantly and spends his free time searching for baby items online, buying anything he likes right away. Because of this, several baby items for our daughter are delivered to their house every day. While I feel guilty for receiving so many gifts and wish they'd hold back a bit, I don't mind them visiting daily. They always consider not to burden us too much. All right, time to head back. Can't stay too long. Yes, you're right. They usually leave after George says this. Coming over around the time I finish lunch and cleanup, and staying no more than 2 hours, so it doesn't affect my evening routines much. It makes sense that Jonathan is such a kind person, having been raised by such loving parents. While they see our daughter almost daily, my own parents haven't met her yet. My parents' house is a bit farther than my in-laws, and it's been hard to align our schedules. Although I don't mind, Jonathan has been concerned whether I'm tired from his parents' daily visits. So, he suggested we take our daughter to meet my parents. And even stay overnight, considering the travel might be too much for her. Jonathan has weekends off, so he'll drop us off on Saturday morning and pick us up on Sunday evening. What a thoughtful husband. This Saturday, as I was packing the car to go to my parents', Linda arrived alone. I made it in time. What's up, Mom? I told you we wouldn't be here today and tomorrow, right? That's why I came. I couldn't bear not seeing her for 2 days, so I thought I'd see her before you leave. Linda, it's just for 2 days, isn't it? For me, 2 days is unbearable. Oh, and I brought this. It'll help her grow big and strong. Baby food? Linda, it's way too early for that. 4 or 5 months will fly by. It's shelf-stable in a pack, so no worries. I got it online, it's really popular and might sell out when you need it. Linda brought a present for my daughter. It was an assortment of baby foods in clear packs, looking quite expensive. Thank you as always. We're heading to my parents' house now. I could have left the baby food at home, but since I had already packed the car and didn't want to go back inside, I stuffed it into my bag. Welcome home. Finally, I get to see my first grandchild. Sorry we're late. We'll just relax today. My parents adored their first grandchild, not leaving her side, always by her. Bringing her here was definitely worth it. I'll have to thank Jonathan for the weekend rides when we get back. The next morning, while chatting with my mom, I casually showed her the baby food Linda gave us. Mom suddenly exclaimed loudly. This is from my mother-in-law. Baby food already. Isn't it funny? Throw it away right now. It was a set of 6 packs, but the one my mom pointed at had discolored a bit. Indeed, upon closer inspection, the color of the finely chopped vegetables seemed off. Mom noticed well. Though only one was discolored, it seemed like a minor incident of a defective product. But this slightly discolored baby food turned out to be the clue that unveiled a lurking devil. My mom insisted on throwing it away, but it was a gift from Linda. It seemed like a quality product, and I wanted to feed it to my daughter. So, I didn't throw it away and contacted the manufacturer to see if it could be replaced. They quickly agreed to send a new one. Impressive for a popular product company. Fast and courteous service. They also asked me to send back the discolored product for quality improvement, which I did. A few days later, the new product arrived. Checking it, the color seemed different from the slightly discolored one. Had my daughter eaten that discolored baby food, she might have been in danger. But it'll be months before she can eat it. If the contents were spoiled, even someone who didn't notice right away like my mom did would probably have realized it eventually, as the discoloration would have become more apparent. So, my daughter likely wouldn't have ended up eating it. So, I'm glad the defective product came to me, who won't be feeding it immediately. Had it gone to someone else who didn't notice the discoloration, it could have been terrible. The company's response was thorough, so I expect such mistakes won't happen again. Therefore, I'm not blaming the company for the defective product. I consider this matter resolved. Just as I thought this, I received a call from the company. Hello? What do you mean? I don't quite understand what you're saying. The call from the company was shockingly unexpected, and I couldn't grasp the situation immediately. It turned out that the baby food had discolored because someone had intentionally injected honey into it. Not during the manufacturing process. The needle hole in the pack was sealed with adhesive, like the kind used for repairing vinyl pools. Although they couldn't identify who purchased the baby food, it was clear it was sold online. There were no issues in the manufacturing process, and since the problem occurred after the sale, the company couldn't do much. However, since it ended up with me, they informed me of the investigation results. They also suggested that if someone gave it to me, I should be cautious of that person. Impressive work by the company. An amateur couldn't have identified the adulteration or the detailed method of tampering. I didn't intend to make a big deal out of it, but if someone was targeting my precious daughter, that's a different story. Babies under 1 year old can develop infant botulism from eating honey, which is rare but can be fatal. And I had a suspect in mind. After hanging up with the company, I immediately went to the police. However, they said they couldn't do anything. I returned home. Told they couldn't proceed as no one had consumed the baby food, and no harm was done. I couldn't blame the police, their response was reasonable. So, I decided to take matters into my own hands and started by telling my husband everything that evening. That happened? But the company gave you the information. We might be able to do something about it. Right? That's why I need you to ask for a favor. Understood. I'll see what I can find out. A few days later, as usual, George and Linda came to see our daughter. But instead of going to her, my husband and I sat George down at the living room table while I spoke with Linda. What's the matter? Why do all of you look so serious? Linda's expression was anxious, and her voice was slightly trembling, as if she was starting to sense what was happening. Could you please take a look at this? I presented Linda with a printout of the purchase history from their online shopping account. It showed records of buying a culinary syringe, used for injecting flavors into meats, and adhesive for vinyl, which George had printed for me. According to the company, the tampered baby food had been purchased online. Furthermore, culinary syringes are not items that can be easily bought at local supermarkets or dollar stores. Suspecting Linda as the perpetrator, I thought she might have bought these tools online along with the baby food, so I had George check their online shopping history. George and Linda shared an online shopping account, and the platform they used doesn't allow deletion of purchase history. Linda, realizing she couldn't delete the history, had set the purchases to hidden. However, hiding them only concealed them temporarily. George was able to find the purchases when he changed the settings. The baby food had honey in it. These items here, you bought them, right? Can you explain? Well, I bought the syringe to try out. You love dumplings, right? I thought it would make them juicier. And the adhesive was for a hole in the garden hose, but it turned out to be too weak to work. Her excuses came too easily, as if she had prepared them in case she got caught. Her expression was clouded, and her voice trembled more. But if Linda simply bought items she needed, this purchase history wasn't conclusive proof of her guilt. So, I played my next card. And what about this? I showed a purchase history of caffeine tablets. I was told during a prenatal checkup that I had too much caffeine. Linda, you bought caffeine tablets. What were you using them for? I use them to stay awake. I often get sleepy in the afternoon. Are you sure you only use them for yourself? Yes, they were just for me. Despite my growing suspicions of Linda due to her attempts to harm me and my daughter, and the caffeine incident, I struggled to believe that the mother-in-law, who had always been kind to me, could do such things. I was prepared to forgive her a little if she admitted her guilt in response to my insistence. However, if she continued to deny it, I had no choice but to reveal my final card. If you insist you don't know, then I'll have to take this to the police. Why do you have that? What I presented as my last card was the food Linda had made for me during my pregnancy, which I had frozen. While I was recovering at my parents' house and even in the month leading up to my delivery, Linda continued to bring dishes. At that time, my distrust of her was still minor, so I accepted the food without saying anything, feeling reluctant to throw it away, and froze it instead. Eventually, I decided to discard the older items, but some from just a few weeks ago remained. I'll have the police check if these contain caffeine. I actually developed insomnia, so this could potentially be considered a case of assault. As evidence of harm, I'll take these purchase records and my pregnancy diagnosis. If the police start investigating, excuses like the ones you're making now certainly won't work. I learned from my experience with the honey-laced baby food incident that to get the police involved, there must be evidence of harm. With the caffeine case, I was the victim and had evidence to support it. While it's uncertain whether this evidence will be sufficient for the police to take action, the possibility is certainly higher now. However, my aim wasn't primarily to rely on the police, it was to get Linda to acknowledge her wrongdoing. I'm sorry. I did it. Faced with the possibility of being reported to the police, Linda finally conceded and admitted her guilt. Mom, why did you do this? I became anxious when the baby was born. My father-in-law, George, is a bold and generous man, often treating people to drinks. When he found out about my pregnancy, he said he'd buy anything, causing my mother-in-law, Linda, to worry about overspending. But Linda has always been a reserved person, not one to confront George. Even if she did try, I can't imagine her stopping George's exuberant nature. Indeed, I've never seen Linda raise her voice or reprimand George. Instead, I picture George, if confronted, pushing forward with his decisions. So, instead of trying to stop George, Linda started to plot against me. She crushed caffeine pills and mixed them into my food, hoping to induce a miscarriage. My husband also ate the food, but being pregnant, it affected me more severely. After the birth, George, as expected, went on a shopping spree for all sorts of baby items. The money he's spending is supposed to be for their retirement. Their growing financial strain and anxiety, along with Linda already crossing a line with the caffeine incident, led her to target my newborn daughter. She didn't use anything immediately lethal, starting with something like honey, which can be dangerous for infants. But human behavior escalates. If I hadn't noticed the honey, she might have just thrown it away, thinking it had gone bad. Not realizing the danger of the honey might have meant not being able to stop Linda from escalating her actions, putting my daughter at risk. The thought chills me. It was fortunate that the baby food was in a transparent package.
"Why didn't you tamper with the formula instead of the baby food?" I asked.
The formula was in a can. We bought the baby's milk in large cans. To tamper with the same milk, she would have had to open the can, which couldn't be done without leaving evidence, unlike the baby food that could be injected through a tiny hole. Furthermore, once we started on solid foods, my daughter might refuse anything given to her. So, Linda thought it best to act before we introduced solid foods. The early action was planned for when she could be alone in our house. George always accompanied her on visits to see the baby and was the primary buyer of baby items. If Linda suddenly bought baby food and gifted it to my daughter, George would get suspicious. She was waiting for the right moment, but when my husband told her I would be visiting my parents for 2 days, she saw her opportunity and hurriedly prepared, visiting our house alone without George's knowledge.
"You fool! What were you thinking?"
"I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry." Linda was left speechless, crying and continually apologizing. Though she had put me and my daughter in danger, Linda is generally a sensible person. But it's precisely because she has common sense that realizing and admitting her guilt has deeply wounded her. George and Linda apologized to us. George continued to scold Linda in a voice loud enough to worry about neighbors calling the police. Linda kept crying and apologizing, her face a mess from tears. "George, Linda seems genuinely remorseful. Let's leave it at that."
"No! I'm partly to blame too. Let me take responsibility."
"Well, in that case." As conditions for accepting Linda's apology, I suggested she explain the situation to the police under George's supervision to be accountable for her actions, apologize to the baby food manufacturer for the trouble caused, and not see our daughter until we deemed it appropriate. Linda accepted these conditions, spoke to the police and apologized to the manufacturer. The police treated it as a domestic issue and issued a stern warning. The manufacturer accepted her apology. However, we decided not to let Linda see our daughter for a while. Affected mentally by the incident, Linda has become quiet at home, performing household chores but seemingly lost in thought. With this issue resolved, our family of 3 is enjoying a peaceful and happy life, free from worries. "I'm taking the whole team and going independent," Tom announced proudly as I returned from work. The news was so sudden, I couldn't quite grasp it. "What?" As I stood there, dumbfounded, not knowing what to say, Tom, grinning, pulled out something. "Also, this. Write it up and hand it in for me." That's. What he laid before me was a completed divorce form. "See ya." Wait. My attempts to stop him were futile, and Tom left. Left alone in the house, I still couldn't fully comprehend the situation and just stood there. But then, suddenly, I thought of some people. Maybe they could help. I quickly grabbed my phone and called them. "My name is Rachel Maxwell. I'm 27 and single. I work as an office clerk at a small IT company. Tired of the monotony, yet finding some comfort in it, I never took action to change anything. Like anyone else, I had my fair share of frustrations with work and relationships, often turning them into conversation topics with my colleagues and bosses. But there was one problem I needed to address. I couldn't find a boyfriend. While friends and colleagues got married, my life had not even a hint of romance. Whenever I thought a friend was calling after a long time, it was usually to announce their marriage. Anxious about my lack of romantic encounters, I couldn't genuinely congratulate them. But even when I thought about taking action, I couldn't bring myself to do it. Well, I thought it'd happen naturally someday. That changed when my closest colleague at work told me she had found a boyfriend. I decided to take serious action and started with a dating app. I installed a well-reviewed app, set up my profile and photos, and began interacting with men. But nothing worked out, and I felt defeated. After a few unsuccessful attempts at matchmaking parties, where either no matches happened or they didn't last. I thought if the next one didn't work out, I'd take a break from seeking romance. However, at the next party, I met Tom, who would become my husband. Tom seemed like a kind man at first sight. His voice and expressions were all so gentle, and he was a great conversationalist. "What do you do for work, Rachel?" "I'm in administration."
Really? That's impressive. I'm terrible with detailed tasks. I could never do office work.
It was the first time someone praised my job, and it made me somewhat happy. I tried to learn more about Tom and expand the conversation, but I quickly got swept up in his talkative charm. Tom continued to shower me with compliments. I wondered if he was just trying to impress me since we just met, but even if that was the case, being praised didn't feel bad. I'm so easily flattered. I found myself becoming more interested in Tom, wanting to talk more, and maybe even more than that. I had come to think so. It seemed Tom felt the same way, and we matched perfectly. After the matchmaking event, we decided to go out for drinks together. "It's so nice to be able to talk with you like this, Rachel." "Me too." With a little alcohol, the mood between us became even better. The idea of this being a one-time thing was no longer an option. "When should we go out next?" "Let me check my schedule." We naturally made plans for next time and parted ways for the day. After meeting a few more times, Tom asked me out. There was no reason to say no, and I happily accepted. 2 years of dating later, Tom proposed. I was truly happy, thinking I was finally getting married. I accepted the proposal, and we became husband and wife. The thought of a future with the man I loved, Tom, filled me with excitement. But later, I would come to regret accepting Tom's proposal. The hectic time of meeting each other's families and our wedding came to an end. Tom's parents were as kind and reliable as he was.
Your parents live that far away? If something happens, you can't rely on them quickly.
Yes, that's true. When I mentioned my parents lived far away, they said, "If you ever have trouble, come to us. We'll help however we can, and just let us know." I was used to my parents being far, but it wasn't without its worries. I was happy to hear the supportive words from my in-laws. Kind and dependable in-laws, and my beloved Tom. I felt surrounded by wonderful people. A few weeks into our marriage, life with Tom was as happy as I had imagined. Having quit my job to get married, I spent weekdays doing housework and waiting for Tom to come home. On weekends, we'd go out or just relax at home watching TV.
"Hey, I'm off tomorrow. Wanna go somewhere?" "Oh, yes, let's go to the shopping mall." "Great idea. And maybe we can stop by the bookstore nearby."
Planning our future outings with Tom was always fun. We didn't have children. Before getting married, we had discussed whether or not to have kids several times and ultimately decided against it. There were various concerns about having children, like my age, physical energy, and financial issues, but the main reason we chose not to was that we wanted to enjoy our lives just the two of us. Seeing happy families with children at places like shopping malls or children's photos on my friends' social media did make me envious at times. However, I believed that nothing could be happier than continuing our current life with Tom, and my fundamental view never changed. Then one day, something Tom said changed my life significantly. I've been thinking about starting my own business. I wasn't too surprised, though. He had mentioned it before we got married. I've been thinking about starting my own business in the future. Wait, start your own business? Of course, I was surprised when I first heard about his entrepreneurial aspirations. I wondered if it was really a good idea. Starting a business meant he would eventually leave his job. Would we be okay in the future? Would it work out? What if it failed? All these questions and worries filled my head. Are you sure that's a good idea? Yeah, I've been thinking about it for a while. I shared all my concerns with Tom. He seemed confident, talking about his business plan, goals, and future aspirations. He even showed me some documents he had prepared, and I could see his seriousness. I thought if he's this prepared, he'll probably succeed. And even if it didn't work out, I believed Tom would handle it well. I decided to support Tom's dream.
What do you think about starting now? We've saved up a good amount. You know, it's better to start young. Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
With that, Tom began preparing for his startup. I decided to use the time I had previously spent on hobbies and rest to help with the business. It was all for Tom. His parents knew about his desire to start a business and came over to our house to help out. When he first said he wanted to start a business, you must have been surprised, right? He just dropped it on you out of nowhere? I was surprised. But he explained his goals and everything, so I thought it might be okay.
Thank you for trusting our son,
his mother said with a gentle smile. Spending more time with Tom's parents, I got to hear stories about him that I never knew in tales from their past. It turns out they used to run a business. It wasn't a large company, just a small one with a few employees, run by the two of them. Eventually, they had to close down due to financial troubles, but it was their story that sparked Tom's interest in entrepreneurship.
We told him to give it up, but he wouldn't listen. We said, if you can take responsibility, then go ahead and try it.
I had no idea about that. I hadn't known about this background, but it seemed like a very Tom-like reason to be interested in starting his own business. 2 months later, with all the preparations and applications complete, the business was up and running. It was an SNS consulting firm. As I didn't understand much about this world, I left the main operations to Tom. Instead, I took on all the administrative work. Tom's parents were probably curious about their son's business. They came over every few days to check on us and help out. Many people might find it unbelievable to see in-laws so often, but I was actually happy to spend time with them. They had become a significant support for me. 6 months into the business, things started to stabilize, and we even hired some part-time employees. I felt sorry about Tom's parents helping so much and offered to pay them, but they said, "We're just killing time. Don't worry about it." I felt bad, but I didn't want to make them uncomfortable with frequent talk about money, so I dropped the subject. Before I knew it, a year had passed since we started the business. The performance was still going strong, and we expanded our team with more employees and part-timers. Everyone we hired was kind, and I was happy to work in such a pleasant environment. I found myself enjoying work more than in my previous job. Everything seemed to be going well, but there was one thing that had changed for the worse. It was Tom's behavior. "Wait, you're taking the day off from work again?" "Yeah, sorry. I've got some stuff to handle." "Yeah, okay." Tom started missing work, saying he was sick or had errands. It's understandable to be sick occasionally, and errands can coincide with work once or twice, but when it happens frequently, it makes me wonder why he can't manage his schedule better. What could be so important that he needs to skip work? He always handles work-related tasks during work hours. The more I think about it, the more I wonder what Tom is secretly up to. Rachel, I might be late or unable to come to work tomorrow because of some errands. Sorry about that. Again tomorrow? Although he apologizes, it feels like just lip service. If he truly felt sorry, I believe he could make some changes in his behavior. One day, I decided to gently bring up Tom's excessive absences. Tom. I know it's your company, but it is still a job. I'd really appreciate it if you could handle personal errands on your days off. Tom seemed surprised by my words. I'm sorry, I'll be more careful. Thanks. After my talk, Tom began coming to work regularly again. It felt good to see him listening to my concerns, given his recent behavior. However, within a month, Tom was back to missing work, claiming to be sick or having errands. I doubted my single reminder would make a lasting impact. So I decided to talk to his parents. I need to talk about Tom. When work slowed down a bit, I approached his parents, who were helping us out. Their surprise was evident. Tom's been doing that? I thought he might be out working. I had no idea he was skipping work. Exactly, even though it's his job. Being sick is one thing, and personal errands are understandable, but it seems like he's taking off a bit too much. I know. As I explained Tom's recent behavior, they became visibly angry. The next day, his parents confronted Tom. Tom, we heard you've been missing work? How did you know that? Rachel talked to us. What are you doing, exactly? Remember, this is the business you started. Don't rely too much on others and take responsibility. We don't want you to end up like us, regretting it when it's too late. Tom seemed shocked and distant when his parents called him out. Are you listening? Yeah, sorry, I'm listening. Just stop causing trouble for others. If you have a serious reason for being absent, you need to explain it in detail. Got it? Got it. Tom reluctantly agreed to his father-in-law's words, seeming annoyed. I had never seen Tom like this before. As I stood there, puzzled, looking at Tom, he asked me, sounding irritated, what? Sorry, it's nothing. All right. With that, Tom left the room. His parents, too, seemed to have never seen Tom behave this way, whispering to each other. Could he be tired? Recently, on days when Tom said he had errands and skipped work, he would always come home late at night. I was curious about what these errands were, but every time I tried to ask, he would evade the question. What is he hiding from me? That night, I felt bad about bringing it up but decided to ask Tom directly. Hey, what's been going on lately? Every time you say you have errands and skip work, you come home late. Are you hiding something from me? We're married, you don't have to hide things. I hoped he would open up, especially after what happened earlier in the day. But Tom just glared at me and said, Rachel, it's none of your business. I don't need to tell you. But it's nothing to do with you if I say it's nothing to do with you. This conversation is over, got it? Wait a minute. Just leave it. I'll make sure not to skip work anymore, okay? You're being too persistent. With that, he walked away from me. Persistent, huh? His words stung. It was the first time Tom had ever spoken to me so harshly. While I was in shock and felt that I could have looked at the situation a little longer, I also felt that it was his job and I wanted to make sure he was doing well. But now, if I bring it up again, he'll probably just call me persistent. I was at a loss for how to interact with Tom from now on. Since his parents talked to him, Tom's attitude towards me had changed drastically. He stopped making excuses and came to work, but he started looking at me with disdain. He ignored me or looked annoyed whenever I spoke to him. Both at home and at work. Hey Tom, about today's work. Don't ignore me, did I do something wrong? It's nothing. What is Tom thinking? Could it be that Tom has come to dislike me? No matter how much I pondered, I couldn't find an answer. However, the day came when I understood what Tom had been thinking and what he had been hiding from me. On that day, Tom came home early from work, which was unusual for him. He seemed upbeat and refreshed. When I finished work and got home, I found Tom, unusually, sitting on the living room sofa. "That's rare," I said, as he had been cooped up in his room recently. Tom turned to me with a grin and said, "Oh, you're back. I have something to tell you." "What's going on?" Tom looked at me triumphantly and announced, "I'm taking all the employees and going independent." "What?" I couldn't understand what he was saying. But Tom, amused by my shock, continued, "Oh, and write this up too." He pulled out a completed divorce form from the table drawer. "I've found a new woman. So, write this, will you?"
Wait, what do you mean?
Just what I said. She's way better than you. I'm really glad I met her. I was stunned. Independence, divorce, it was all too sudden. Oh. Anyway, make sure to submit this divorce form. See ya. Tom left the house, leaving me standing there, dumbfounded, in the silent room. In front of me was the completed divorce form. The sudden turn of events overwhelmed me, and I couldn't grasp the situation. What should I do now? What's the right action to take? I couldn't find any answers. But then, I thought of someone. His parents. They hadn't been at the company today, but they should be at home. With trembling hands, I took out my smartphone and called Tom's parents. "Hello?" After a few rings, I heard my mother-in-law's kind voice. "Mom," I managed to say, tears welling up from a sense of relief as I heard her voice. "What's wrong?" It's about Tom." I somehow explained to my mother-in-law what Tom had said to me and the situation I was in now. "I don't know what to do." "Just hold on a moment, let me talk to father." My mother-in-law, sounding flustered, went to consult with my father-in-law. But quickly she came back and said, "Just wait at home for us. We'll come over and have a discussion together." "Really? Is that okay?" "Yes, of course. We'll be there soon." A few minutes later, my in-laws arrived. "Mom, Dad. Are you okay, Rachel?" "I'm fine." But as soon as I saw them, I broke down in tears. I felt pathetic for being in such a situation. They hurriedly supported me and brought me to the living room. After a few minutes, I calmed down and explained everything in more detail than before. That Tom was having an affair. That on days he said he had errands and missed work, he always came home late. That he had left with the divorce papers, telling me to submit them. And that he had announced he was taking all the employees and going independent. I was so confused, my words came out in bits and pieces. My in-laws listened intently and nodded in understanding. But after I finished, they seemed stunned and speechless. Then my father-in-law said, "I'm truly sorry. Our son has." My mother-in-law also apologized. "No, it's not something you two should apologize for." They bowed their heads in apology. I felt uncomfortable and quickly asked them to lift their heads. For the moment, I was relieved to have talked to my in-laws. Considering everything that had happened, I knew they would be on my side. But I was still unsure about what to do next. I needed to find out if Tom had approached all the employees about going independent, where he was now, and gather evidence of his affair. After the way Tom treated me and then thrust the divorce papers at me, I couldn't even think about rebuilding our relationship. Since Tom clearly wanted a divorce, I decided to go through with it regardless of how the situation unfolded. Naturally, I wanted the divorce to be on the grounds of Tom's fault, and I expected to receive alimony. What should I do? As I muttered this to myself, my father-in-law, who was sitting across from me, spoke up. "Let's resolve this one step at a time. I'll look into Tom's situation, and Rachel, please handle the company matters." Although Tom has been talking about independence, the fact that none of the employees are stirring up suggests it might just be all talk. Understood. So, I decided to divide and conquer with my in-laws. I wouldn't let Tom get away with saying it was all a joke. When Tom first announced the divorce and his intention to go independent, I was overwhelmed by a mix of emotions and confusion. But now, things are different. I started preparing to bring Tom down to hell, fueled by my clear hatred for him. A month later, Tom was standing in front of me. I had gathered all the evidence and testimonies I could and summoned Tom to my in-laws' house. Initially, Tom continued his heartless remarks, but when I told him I would file for divorce if he showed up, he quickly changed his tune and agreed. The thought of him cluelessly showing up, not knowing what awaited him, was amusing to me. "So, what do you want?" "I came because you called me." There's nothing to talk about, though. Where had the Tom before the business venture gone? It felt like I was in a bad dream. "You've been doing whatever you wanted, haven't you?"
What? What do you mean by doing whatever I want? Explain yourself.
Tom, crossing his legs, responded provocatively. Previously, I would have been at a loss for words, but not anymore. Having affairs, trying to go independent on your own.
What? I told you that already. You're calling that doing whatever I want?
And there's more. Stealing money and supplies, as I heard. I knew about the affairs and the talk of company independence. But as I dug deeper, I found out that Tom had been taking money from the company. When I brought up the money, Tom's face turned pale, and he visibly started to panic.
What? Why would I need to do that? Are you crazy? And do you have proof? You're not just making this up to get back at me, are you?
You think I'd lie about this now? If you think I'm lying because I don't want to divorce you, you're wrong. I am going to divorce you. That's why I called you here today.
Then show the proof now,
Tom said, sounding desperate. So, I showed him the security camera footage, just as he wished.
What? Cameras? Why?
You were absent from the company for a while, remember? I installed them then. I even consulted you about it, but you weren't listening. Actually, I had installed security cameras near the safe to enhance security. I couldn't just set them up without consulting Tom, so I asked him about it. He seemed distracted and just replied, "Yeah, sure," not really paying attention. But there was no doubt he had agreed, so I installed the cameras after consulting with the employees. The reason I knew Tom had been stealing money was because of those cameras. I could have just said I saw it on the cameras, but one of the employees, who Tom hadn't approached about joining his independent venture, had witnessed his suspicious behavior. This employee was an older part-timer who hadn't been asked to join Tom's new venture. You were going around asking people to join you in your independence, promising better conditions than now. Well, everyone refused. But to think the only person you didn't approach, the older part-timer, would tip us off. Is this some kind of joke? Angry Tom challenged me, and I showed him the security camera footage. I narrated it specially for him. See? You're stealing money here. Look.
Ah, shut up,
Tom responded, clearly unable to deny the evidence on the video. He looked dejected. What were you going to use it for? Startup funds. He had been stealing from the company to fund his own startup.
Unbelievable.
I had no choice.
What do you mean no choice? Why couldn't you just continue the business as is?
Because.
Because what? Explain yourself.
My father-in-law, who had been silent until now, clearly frustrated with Tom's evasive attitude, finally spoke up. Tom then started shaking and began to explain why he wanted to start his own business. It turns out it all started with an affair. He met a woman at a bar after work. The flirt was consulting for people like Tom who were starting their own businesses. As their relationship progressed, he began to think about starting a new business with her. Starting a business was harder than I thought. So why did you decide to start a new business? It doesn't make sense. I thought it would work out with her. It was just pitiful. A person who gives up so easily on difficult tasks wouldn't succeed in a new venture. And to think he was stealing company funds for his independence. He might cause even bigger problems in the future. You're incredibly selfish, aren't you? Were you going to see your affair partner when you said you had errands and didn't come to work? Right. I want to quickly demand alimony and have him out of my sight. Even my in-laws seem to have moved from anger to sheer disbelief. About the alimony for the affair. As soon as I brought up the topic of alimony, Tom, who had been looking dejected, suddenly lifted his head to look at me. Then he said something utterly too late.
Rachel, can't we start over? I'll break up with her. I'll drop the business venture. Let's start fresh, just the two of us.
Start over? Was he serious? Was he sane? As I stood there, stunned, Tom continued.
Come on, it'll be all right. I was stupid to talk about divorce. Let's go to various places together again, make lots of happy memories. So, no way.
However, my father-in-law, angered by Tom's words, slammed evidence of the affair onto the desk.
How dare you even think of starting over after doing such things?
This is. What my father-in-law presented were documents and photos from a private investigator, detailing Tom's affair. There were photos of Tom and his mistress entering a hotel, walking arm in arm, looking happy. And a document meticulously detailing where and what Tom and his mistress were doing. There was no way he could deny it now. What? Why are there such photos? You hired a detective?
Yes, if she's to divorce and claim alimony, solid evidence was necessary. She never know when she might retract your confession about the affair. So, it's better to have a detective gather evidence, isn't it?
Why are Dad and Mom on Rachel's side?
Who would side with someone who does such despicable things?
You're a huge disappointment.
You probably said let's start over because you didn't want to pay alimony, right? What a pathetic son.
I'm genuinely grateful that my in-laws are sensible people. As soon as Tom realized they weren't on his side, he slumped again.
No matter what you do, my feelings for you will never return.
With those final words, making it clear there would be no reconciliation, Tom had nothing left to say. Afterward, I pursued legal action against Tom and his affair partner for alimony. According to my lawyer, both were reluctant to pay, but eventually, they begrudgingly agreed. It's unbelievable they would still resist at this point. Though Tom had shown a defeated demeanor during our discussion, his true colors were disappointing. A week after the divorce was finalized, Tom sent me a ridiculous email blaming me for his breakup with his affair partner, wondering what I was going to do about it. I decided to ignore him, but as he persistently sent more emails, I replied with a simple "stop being so persistent," and he stopped contacting me. Since then, there's been no word from him, but the alimony continues to be paid, so he must be managing somehow. Later, I heard from my in-laws that they had also cut ties with Tom. Now alone, having alienated his parents, wife, and affair partner. I hope Tom reflects on the terrible things he's done. I'm now leading the company Tom and I started, acting as its representative. Albeit in name only. Relying heavily on the support of those around me. But my employees all believe in me, and their trust is both heartwarming and reassuring. My former in-laws, now just strangers, still visit occasionally, concerned about my well-being. I'm surrounded by such warm-hearted people. While grateful, I continue to strive for the company's expansion. My name is Mia Nelson. I have a husband who's 4 years older than me, and I have a stepson. Although I'm not his biological mother, I've always considered him my own son. But suddenly, a tragedy struck.
Harrison had an accident.
While I was on a business trip, I received an unbelievable call from the hospital. My son had been hit by a truck that ran a red light and was rushed to the emergency room. He was hit while saving a little girl from getting run over. The light was completely red, and the driver appeared to have been dozing off. The fault was entirely on the truck driver. He also sustained injuries and was taken to the hospital. I then interrupted my work and hurried to the hospital where my son was taken. There, I saw my son, unrecognizable.
Harrison!
By the time I arrived, he had already passed away. His body was covered in painful wounds, and his face was draped with a white cloth. When I removed the cloth, there lay my son, looking as if he was just asleep. Seeing his face, I couldn't stop my tears for a long time. I met my son when he was 15. He was in the midst of his rebellious phase, but he never showed any defiance towards me and opened up his heart. We grew close as if we were a real mother and son from the beginning. He started living on his own when he went to college, but we kept in regular touch. I believe we were seen as a close-knit family by those around us. Whenever he had an important decision to make, he would always consult me. The memories of my son brought even more grief. In contrast to me, my daughter-in-law, Kelly, showed no signs of sadness. Kelly looked at me crying with a cold gaze. She was 25 years old, 5 years younger than my son. Kelly looked at me crying with a cold gaze. I couldn't understand how she could be so expressionless when her husband had just died. Although I wanted to confront her, I was too overwhelmed with the loss of my son. Later, I took Kelly back home with me. My husband also looked down with a complex expression, but he was not crying.
Well, you never know what might happen in life.
What are you saying? Our boy had his whole life ahead of him. He must have had so many things he wanted to do.
There's no use in just grieving, right? Crying won't bring Harrison back. Aren't you sad? Your own son just died.
As I said this, my daughter-in-law, Kelly, interjected with a look of exasperation. She seemed irritated with me.
My father-in-law is right, there's no point in crying all the time. You seem out of your mind right now, so I'll take care of all the funeral arrangements. No, he was my son too, and I want to help.
Please don't.
He was my husband. He'd probably want his wife, not a stranger who's not even related by blood, to do this. Harrison loved me with all his heart. That might be true, but... Anyway, please don't interfere. Honestly, it's troublesome having someone who's not in their right mind around.
Kelly looked at me as if I were trash. She had always been harsh towards me since the beginning of her marriage to my son. I somewhat understood why Kelly was so harsh with me. To be honest, I was against their marriage from the start. When I first met her, she didn't seem to truly love my son. But my son seemed to genuinely love her, so I couldn't object. I guess my son saw some good in her that I couldn't see. I had to believe that. But sadly, it seemed my intuition was right. I had been wondering when to tell my son about her true nature. I never imagined I'd lose my son before I could tell him the truth. I was struggling to accept this cruel reality. Yet, time went on, and the day before the funeral arrived. As per Kelly's instructions, I didn't say anything and just kept quiet. On the eve of the funeral, Kelly came to our house. Shockingly, during dinner, she said something outrageous.
I'm sorry, but please don't come to the funeral tomorrow. What? Strangers like you are not welcome. Stay away. It's disgraceful.
Kelly suddenly raised her voice and started yelling at me. I was stunned. She then said with a nasty smile, "You're just a stranger not related by blood to Harrison, right? He wouldn't want you there."
What are you saying?
You agree, don't you, father-in-law? Kelly asked my husband sweetly. Then my husband looked at me and nodded heavily.
Indeed, you're a stranger.
Kelly is right, you have no right to attend.
Stay away from the funeral.
Seeing my husband take my daughter-in-law Kelly's side, I was astounded.
All right, I get it. I won't attend tomorrow's funeral, just as you wish.
When I responded this way, Kelly smiled as if pleased. She'll probably regret it, but I don't care. Just looking at their faces made me feel nauseous, so I left the room. The next day, the day of my son's funeral arrived. Since Kelly had refused my participation, I did as told and stayed home. While I was idly at home, suddenly, there was a loud noise at the front door. Footsteps approached me, and there was Kelly, out of breath. My husband followed soon after. Both seemed very panicked. I had a pretty good idea why they came to me. As I silently observed them, Kelly spoke up.
Hey! You know something, don't you? Isn't it rude to barge into my house and address me so informally? Shut up! Just explain what's going on.
What are you talking about?
No one has shown up for the funeral, even though it's time. The staff at the funeral home are troubled because they can't start with no attendees. You know something about this, don't you?
Oh, that. It's obvious why no one's there.
What the?
Kelly's irritation grew as I casually replied. Of course, I knew why no attendees were coming. Seeing Kelly and my husband so flustered, I decided to tell them the truth.
I asked our clients and employees to refrain from attending, as it's a family funeral.
You're lying. We were expecting the company president and other executives today.
Yeah. What are you doing, meddling in things?
My husband joined in with complaints. He probably wanted to use the funeral to get cozy with the company president. He looked very frustrated. I decided to give my husband a dose of reality.
You might have thought getting close to the president would improve your position, but that's not how it works. If you are a president or an executive yourself, maybe it would be different.
But you're just a regular employee, aren't you?
Were you thinking of getting noticed by a big company's president and working for them? Unfortunately, if you can't even make a mark in our company, there's no way other companies would take notice of you.
Huh? Kelly was stunned as I revealed the truth. My husband, Arthur, standing next to her, turned incredibly pale. There was a reason for this. But before telling Kelly about Arthur's truth, I decided to explain why no relatives came.
None of the relatives came because they all sided with me. I didn't want to lie to them, so I honestly told them about your true nature, Kelly. Wait a minute. What do you mean by my true nature? I'm just a young widow who lost her husband. A poor widow? Could you please spare me the nonsense? You didn't even seem sad when you learned about our son's death. In fact, you looked almost happy. What? Are you insulting me? I could sue you for defamation.
Go ahead if you want to.
I doubt you could even start a lawsuit.
Kelly's face turned red, and she looked like she might hit me any moment. I knew Kelly's true nature and her plans. She thought she was hiding it, but I knew all along.
You didn't marry my son because you loved him, you were after his money, weren't you? What? What are you talking about? I loved Harrison with all my heart. You don't have to bother with such transparent lies. You targeted Harrison thinking he would become the president of my company, right? Out of all the men you dated, Harrison must have had the best prospects. What are you saying? You're making it sound like I was cheating. That's defamation, right?
Never mind that. You seem to be deceived by Arthur. You see, I'm the president of the company, not Arthur.
No way, you, a woman, being the president?
Impossible.
If you think I'm lying, why don't you check our company's website?
It clearly states that I'm the CEO. When I said that, Kelly took out her phone and started looking it up. She must have realized that what I was saying was true. She looked utterly shocked. Then she began to complain to Arthur.
Hey! I thought Arthur was the president. What's this about? Have you been lying to me all this time? I can't believe this.
I'm sorry. Arthur apologized in a small voice. Embarrassingly enough, Arthur had a crush on Kelly, who was much younger than him. I had known from the beginning of their marriage that Arthur saw Kelly as a woman.
Kelly is young, friendly, and adorable. Maybe you could learn a thing or two from her?
When Kelly came to greet us for the wedding, Arthur praised her like that. Whenever Kelly was to visit our home, Arthur dressed up and paid attention to his appearance. Normally, he was sloppy at home, but he put effort into his appearance when Kelly was around. I was speechless seeing such a side of Arthur. It seemed Arthur had even lied to Kelly to gain her favor.
With me, Kelly, you won't ever have to worry about money. I was planning to let Harrison inherit the company, So if you stay with us, you'll have a secure life.
Arthur probably said such things to Kelly. Kelly, blinded by greed, seemed to have been deceived and completely believed my husband's words. Kelly always spoke sweetly to Arthur. And he was completely smitten with her. It was embarrassing to watch. Of course, our son Harrison didn't know Kelly's true nature. He always spoke highly of her.
Kelly always worries about you and Dad. I'm so lucky to have a wife who cares for my parents. She's perfect at housework and a great help.
Is that so? Kelly must have been playing the role of a good wife in front of Harrison. But she showed her true colors to me. When it was just the two of us, Kelly's attitude would suddenly become cold. She'd barely respond while looking at her phone. When Harrison and Arthur returned, she'd instantly switch back to being all smiles. I was amazed at how well she could act. I doubted Harrison would believe me if I told him the truth. Even if I did, he might side with his wife. Such thoughts crossed my mind, and out of fear, I couldn't bring myself to reveal the truth. Thinking about it now, I should have told Harrison the truth sooner. Seeing Kelly and Arthur in front of me filled me with deep regret. And there was more Kelly didn't know about Harrison and Arthur. I decided to reveal the truth to her.
Kelly, you thought Harrison would inherit my company, but he never wanted to be the president. What? So, I could never have become the CEO's wife?
No, you could have been, perhaps.
What do you mean? Were you running other companies?
No, Harrison was planning to start his own business. He was packing his head with management skills at my company, and then he was going to launch his own. Harrison was popular. Several employees said they'd follow him to his new venture. Even before it started, there were companies eager to do business with him.
I didn't know that.
Harrison didn't like bringing work home, so he deliberately didn't tell Kelly about it.
But I am his wife, he could have at least told me.
He was afraid of opposition, especially if he started his own business with all the risks involved. He planned to tell you after getting things on track. Kelly listened to my story in a daze. The company I run is involved in the apparel business. We also handle famous brands, and I am well known in the industry. Thanks to our success, we have over 100 employees. I started this company from scratch and managed it without much deficit. Harrison had admired me for running the company and aspired to be a business owner since high school. He considered starting a business in college but decided to learn under me first. After graduating from college, Harrison joined my company. Like any other new employee, he started with basic tasks. He kept improving and getting familiar with the work, and then I started teaching him about management. Harrison caught on even faster than me, impressing me often. Apparently, Kelly had no idea that I was the president of the company.
I had never heard that you were the president. Why keep such an important thing a secret? It might be important to you, but maybe not so much to Harrison. He's not the type to judge people by their titles. I think he wanted you to see him for who he is, not for his connections. This is just my guess, though.
Arthur, in front of me, sometimes acted as if he were the president when talking to Kelly. I never corrected him simply because it was too much trouble. I thought Kelly would believe whatever Arthur said. She never realized the truth, probably because she only saw people superficially. By the way, Arthur was not originally my employee. He used to work in sales at a food manufacturer, but got laid off after struggling to find a new job during a recession. Then I decided to hire him at my company. To put it mildly, Arthur was not the best at his job. There were constant mistakes during his first 6 months, causing complaints from other employees. He's improved somewhat, but he's never been highly motivated and remains a regular employee. However, Kelly was under the impression that Arthur was a successful company president. Realizing Arthur's true nature, Kelly let out a big sigh.
So Arthur has been living off women? That's really lame.
You don't have to say it like that. Disgusted by Kelly, Arthur was visibly shocked. Ignoring Arthur, I continued speaking to Kelly.
You might have been hiding it, but I've known about your plans for a long time. You married into this family for the money, didn't you?
Yes, that's right.
I married into this family for the money,
Kelly confessed, revealing her true nature. I then asked her a question.
You have a main boyfriend, right? Your ex from your student days, who's the same age as you and into music.
Kelly was shocked at my words. She probably never expected her infidelity to be exposed. Arthur was also greatly disturbed.
What? You had another man? You said I was your favorite.
Overwhelmed with shock, Arthur was almost in tears. Seeing Arthur's pathetic state, I could only sigh.
Aren't you ashamed, getting serious about such a young girl? The two of you have been going on trips, dining out, and frequently going out when I'm not around. Kelly, you must have received quite a bit of money from him, all from my earnings, right?
Arthur looked down, his face turning pale at my words. It seemed that he and Kelly had become involved about 6 months after Harrison and Kelly got married. I was suspicious of Arthur's behavior and hired a private detective to investigate. It was revealed that Arthur and Kelly were meeting regularly. And Kelly had several other men. Among them, it seemed that Kelly's main interest was her long-term ex-boyfriend. She probably didn't marry him because he didn't have much money. Kelly was the kind of woman who would do anything for money. I couldn't forgive her for deceiving my son. Yet, even with her true nature exposed, Kelly had a triumphant smile.
Does it matter if I have other men? Harrison is no longer in this world, and since he's gone, I can't be blamed for infidelity, right?
I felt like hitting her as she spoke so smugly. But I knew that would mean losing my composure. I needed to stay calm.
So, your goal was money all along. Of course, it's natural to be dazzled by money. Living in such a magnificent mansion, anyone would be envious. I've always dreamed that this house would be mine after you're gone.
Hearing her talk so blatantly about inheritance in front of the living, I was appalled by her corrupted soul. Arthur was completely devastated and couldn't contribute to the conversation. He realized he had been used by her and was deeply hurt. Ignoring Arthur, Kelly continued.
As Harrison's wife, I'm entitled to the insurance money and inheritance, right? He was frugal, so he must have saved a considerable amount. Even if you don't like it, I have the right to claim it. Of course, I'm not denying your rights, but I don't think Harrison left as much money as you expected.
What are you talking about?
Harrison let me live in a luxury apartment and said I could use the credit card freely. He made sure you weren't in need, but it seems there wasn't much room for savings. What? Did you take his money without telling me?
I wouldn't do such a thing.
Harrison was planning to use his own funds to start a business. I was willing to support him, but he refused. What's that supposed to mean?
Kelly had believed Harrison, being a good earner, must have saved at least several $1,000,000. Shocked by the unexpected truth, she was momentarily speechless. Then, as if a switch was flipped, Kelly began to scream.
What's the point of getting married if there's no money? My husband is gone, and now there's no one to earn for me. If he had to die, he should have left enough money so I wouldn't have to worry for the rest of my life.
She ranted about my deceased son right in front of me. Suddenly, 2 figures appeared from the back of the room.
I never thought you could be such a despicable person. Where did we go wrong in raising you? What? Why are my parents here?
Kelly's parents, whom I had invited over, appeared, leaving Kelly pale-faced. In fact, anticipating that my daughter-in-law and her husband would return to the house, I had invited her parents over. Her parents were reasonable people. When I told them about Kelly, they deeply apologized to me. Kelly seemed to have had a difficult relationship with her strict, education-focused parents, and rarely went back home. Her parents apologized to me again.
We're terribly sorry for the great inconvenience which our daughter has caused. We share the responsibility for the way she turned out. If there's anything we can do to take responsibility, please let us know.
Kelly's parents apologized so sincerely that I felt embarrassed. Even as they apologized, Kelly showed no signs of remorse. Her mother, fed up with her attitude, waved her hand like she chased her away.
That's awful. You didn't have to be so mean. You heartless person. A daughter like you is no daughter of ours. Don't ever come back home again. We have no intention of leaving you any inheritance.
Kelly seemed somewhat taken aback as her mother sharply disowned her. She began to cry quietly. Ignoring her, I turned to Arthur.
We're getting a divorce. What?
I have no desire to stay with a man who cheats with younger women. You should know, I have no intention of keeping you at the company, so please leave quietly.
Wait. How am I supposed to live now?
I don't know. Maybe you should find some part-time work. Then Arthur made a foolish suggestion to the crying Kelly.
You've lost Harrison and are alone now, too. Why don't we live together? We can survive on Harrison's insurance money for a while. I think we can make it if it's just the two of us.
What? Why should I live with a useless old man like you, who has no money and has been dumped by his wife?
You're worthless to me without money.
Rejected by Kelly, Arthur began to cry. Why don't you go back to the funeral home? The staff must be having a hard time. But there's no one there. It's the funeral you arranged, right? Just go back. Kelly's parents said sternly, and she left the house with heavy steps. Naturally, with no one else attending, the funeral was cancelled. Kelly was billed for the entire cost of the last-minute cancellation. It was a considerable amount due to the lavish funeral she had planned. Unable to pay, her parents had to cover the expenses. And in return, they completely severed ties with her. The biggest inconvenience was probably caused to the funeral home staff. They must have never seen a funeral with no attendees before. Since the funeral was cancelled, I later decided to conduct my son's funeral anew. In fact, I had secretly been arranging the funeral without my daughter-in-law and her husband knowing. For this ceremony, I invited relatives and business associates who we regularly interact with. The funeral for my son saw an attendance so large that the venue could barely accommodate everyone, truly showing the depth of my son's popularity and the respect he commanded. After everything settled, Arthur and I divorced. I had, of course, claimed him alimony. Arthur ended up in debt because of the alimony I demanded and struggled to find a job. He couldn't find a job as a full-time employee, but it seems he managed to find some manual labor part-time work. He now lives in a shabby apartment, barely getting by. As for Kelly, already in debt, she lost most of Harrison's insurance money to repay her loans. Abandoned by her parents, she started working part-time, trying to survive on her own. She tried to rely on a man again but ended up being deceived and incurring more debt. Maybe it was some kind of curse. I don't know what became of her after that. As for me, I continued to focus on running my company. I still cry when I think of my son, but my employees have been supportive. With their help, I've been able to keep going, cherishing the people around me. I want to continue living my life, cherishing the people around me. Get out if you're not going to work, you good for nothing.
Quit being a parasite and stop being a mother right now.
I never knew they were the type of people who could say such awful things so casually. I just wanted to create a happy family filled with courage and happiness with Jack and Anne. Where did I go wrong?
Understood.
I realized I couldn't continue living with these two. I decided to divorce Jack and return to my previous life. But the moment I went back to my old life, it's unbelievable how they suddenly reached out, as if they had flipped a switch. Did they think I would just do as they said? If so, they really need to stop taking me for granted. I know all too well that it's not me they want, but my money. I am Aubrey Edwards. I used to work as a sales clerk for a local company, but now I'm a full-time homemaker. Having experienced financial struggles in my childhood when my family's business faltered, I'm admittedly a bit strict about money. My twin sister Amelia is the same way. Both of us are determined not to struggle with money like we did in our childhood, which I believe has significantly influenced our future. Besides my sales clerk job, I also have a business I run with Amelia, and it's doing fairly well. Between my outside job and the business with Amelia, my personal life had been neglected, but then a turning point came. It happened at the office where I worked as a sales clerk. One day, an insurance salesman came in. Normally, I wouldn't pay much attention as we were already covered, but I noticed the pen he was using. This was my first encounter with Jack, who would later become my husband.
That pen, it's from that theme park, right? I really wanted it too, and went there once, but couldn't get it.
The pen he had was a limited edition from a famous theme park, hard to come by. It had been a hot topic back then for its cuteness and limited availability, now traded at premium prices. I also went to the theme park back then eager to get that pen, but missed out on it in a lottery, a frustrating memory.
Yes, my daughter wanted it, so I went along. Both she and I won the lottery. It's kind of funny, me using this big body of mine with this pen, isn't it?
He said, laughing heartily. His laughter and the way he spoke were somehow memorable.
Not at all. Oh, you have a daughter? Yes, I'm a single father. And you know, this is the first time I've had such an engaging conversation using this pen. Really? I'm a big fan of that character, and I got carried away. Sorry, we're at work. No problem at all. Oh, by the way, my name is Jack Edwards.
That's how we started talking because of one pen. He became in charge of my workplace, and since that day, he began showing up now and then. As we talked about trivial things, something big happened.
I know it might seem a bit off for a guy with a child to say this, but I just had to share my feelings with you, Aubrey. Would you consider dating me? Me? As I've been talking with you, Aubrey, I've found myself wanting to know more about you. Sorry for being so sudden. No, it's fine. I enjoy talking with you, Jack. I'd be happy to.
Then, Jack's face lit up with a bright smile.
Great. I was worried you'd say no. No, not at all. Looking forward to it.
From there, our relationship progressed smoothly. After dating for 5 years, it was naturally time to start thinking about marriage.
Aubrey, would you marry me? Yes, I'd love to. I've been hoping to be with you forever, so. I'm just so happy.
I couldn't hide my surprise and joy. He proposed at a lovely restaurant during Christmas. Having led a life distant from men before meeting Jack, it felt surreal that this was happening to me. But as I stood there, unable to hide my astonishment, Jack got serious.
Aubrey, there's something I need to talk to you about before we get married. What? What's up all of a sudden?
Seeing Jack's unusually serious face made me anxious.
As you know, I have a daughter. If we're going to get married, I'd like you to be her mother. Me, a mother.
I was 35 then. Being in the prime of my career and focused solely on work, I remember being taken aback when suddenly asked to become a mother. I never really felt maternal, and the idea of suddenly becoming someone's mother was confusing.
Sorry for springing this on you. But I'm serious about our future. My daughter is almost 10. She can handle most things in her life. Wait a minute, please. I knew you had a daughter, but me, suddenly becoming a mother? I mean, we've played together before, sure, but I also have my job. And said she'd be happy if you became her mother. And please, don't quit your job.
Jack seemed desperate to convince me.
Your life won't change much, Aubrey. I just want you to be there for and as her mother.
Normally, being asked this before marriage might make someone reconsider. But I was wrong. His candidness in sharing all this with me must mean he's genuinely serious about our future together. I ended up convincing myself that this had to be the case.
Look at me. You're this serious about our future, right? Of course. Jack's precious daughter is important to me too. I'll do whatever I can. Thank you so much.
That's how we ended up getting married. I had met Anne a few times before, and she seemed like a typical, everyday girl.
Anne? Yes, I'm Anne. Dad told me about you. You're Aubrey, right?
Anne said with a smile, and I thought she was really cute. I also felt she was a very nice kid, and I had no problem living with her as a family.
I'm going to marry your dad, Anne. I wanted to come and say hello. I'm so happy that someone as wonderful as you, Aubrey, is going to be my mom.
I can't deny that this exchange made me feel really good. I was determined to be happy. With that resolve, I decided to marry Jack and become Anne's mother. However, it didn't take long for me to realize that this feeling was a mistake in the first place. The days after our marriage were happy. At first, I was worried about marrying someone with a child, but it turned out to be needless worry. And was a well-behaved child and didn't need much attention. She mostly took care of herself, so there wasn't much for me to do. Around that time, I was assigned to a project that could lead to a promotion. If my proposal was accepted in the upcoming competition, I might become a section manager, so I was a bit on edge. I was in the final push, thinking I might make it, when Anne said something unexpected.
Aubrey, can I talk to you for a sec? What's up, Anne? Well, you might think it's selfish, but I really want a mom at home.
Watching Anne glance at me apologetically, I felt like my heart was being squeezed. I might have been making her feel lonely without realizing it. It made me feel helpless.
That's right. You're always alone when you come back home. I'm used to being alone, but sometimes I just feel this tightness in my chest. That's why I want a mom to be there.
With a big promotion at stake, I had been working overtime until late at night. There were days I caught the last train home for 3 consecutive nights. Lately, I hadn't had a proper look at Jack or Anne. With Jack often away on business trips or working late, I realized I had been making Anne feel very lonely. And the fact that she called me Mom filled me with joy.
Mom, you mean me? Who else? You're my mom, aren't you?
Seeing Anne's bashful smile, I wanted to protect her happiness till the end. Sure, I liked my job, and a promotion would mean a higher salary. But work isn't everything in life. I seriously thought about what I truly wanted to protect. And then, I made a decision. I'm going to quit my job and be a full-time homemaker. I want to take care of our home and not let Anne feel lonely anymore.
Thank you, I'm so happy.
I was a bit worried about what Jack would think, but he surprisingly agreed.
That's great for Anne. And don't worry, my earnings are enough to support the 3 of us. We'll be just fine.
Hearing this and seeing Jack laugh heartily, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. However, the peaceful days didn't last long. I was getting used to life as a full-time homemaker when Jack came home one day, visibly irritated.
Welcome back. What's wrong?
Nothing. Saying so, he marched straight to the bedroom with heavy footsteps. Without even taking a bath, he stayed in the bedroom, not coming out. His irritated demeanor suggested something had happened at work. But since he was sulking alone, I had no idea what it was. The next evening at dinner, Jack finally opened up, revealing the reason for his frustration.
I'm definitely better at my job, so why didn't they choose me? Did something happen at work? Listen to this. I'm more capable and have been with the company longer, so why wasn't I chosen? I was almost going to be promoted to department head.
As he said this, he was banging his hands on the table. Summarizing Jack's story, there was a chance he or a colleague of his age might be promoted to department head. But in the end, his colleague got the position.
That guy, he joined midway, leaves early without doing overtime, and yet, why him? I've been contributing to this company for decades since graduating college. It must be tough, but people do notice your work. You'll have another chance.
However, my words seemed to irritate him even more. He glared at me with a furious expression.
What do you know? Spouting such nonsense.
Since that day, Jack started taking his anger out on me. One evening, I prepared dinner and waited for Jack, but he didn't come home for a long time. Worried because there was no contact, I approached him when he finally arrived.
Welcome back. I was worried since it's late. What about dinner? It's late, so maybe tomorrow. What are you thinking? It's Friday, and I had a business dinner. Can't you figure that out? That's why you can't do a job properly.
He sighed heavily and went to the bedroom. Whenever he's like this, he wants to be alone and locks the bedroom door. Since our bed is in the bedroom, I can't enter when Jack locks it. I used to ask him to unlock the door, but lately, I've given up. Jack must be struggling with his own issues. Trying to convince myself he needs space, I prepared to sleep on the sofa. As I started feeling tired from being affected by Jack's mood swings and sulkiness, I noticed a change in Anne too.
Good morning, Anne. You stayed up late last night, are you okay?
Stop it. Annoying first thing in the morning. She muttered under her breath and walked away.
Wait, what about breakfast?
She increasingly acted as if she couldn't hear me. I thought it was just a phase and watched over her, but her behavior became too much. I once tried to discuss it with Jack, but he didn't listen at all.
Jack, have you noticed anything odd about Anne lately? Will you stop? That's your job as a mother. Neglecting your duties as a mother, that's just pathetic. I'm not neglecting anything. That's why I wanted to talk to you. I'm tired because, unlike you, I work. Don't drag me into unnecessary stuff.
Saying this, he swiftly went to the bedroom. After discussions he finds inconvenient or troublesome, he usually locks the bedroom, leaving me feeling overwhelmed. I couldn't get any consultation, so I decided to give up. Lately, I can't seem to have a proper conversation with either Jack or Anne. Is this what family life is supposed to be like? I had no idea who to turn to or how to solve these painful feelings. Just when I was thinking a change was needed, and unusually initiated a conversation.
Hey, I'm planning to hang out with some friends.
Feeling happy that she spoke to me after a long time, I responded cheerfully.
Oh, going out with friends? That's nice. Have fun.
Then, and glared at me while slamming the table. I can't believe it. What's with the have fun? Are you mocking me? I was confused by her reaction, but it seemed to make her even angrier.
How am I supposed to go out when I don't have any money?
And is already in middle school. It's that age when even a little outing with friends tends to involve spending money.
Oh, my apologies, I wasn't thinking. Sorry for being so oblivious. How much do you need?
About $600. She said, tilting her head, sticking out her chin, and reaching out her hand. Since when had she become so brash? There are things you just don't do, even in a rebellious phase, especially to your parents. Although I had been smiling until then, I decided I couldn't overlook this behavior and spoke to Anne.
Look, when you do that, it hurts me. And besides, $600 is a lot for a middle schooler to go out once, don't you think?
I thought being clear would make Anne realize. But it seemed my approach backfired, making her even more irritated.
What? Suddenly playing the card of a mother is so annoying. You don't understand anything, yet you have the nerve to say that. Unreal.
She said and walked away. As she casually left the room, I noticed she took my wallet, which left me shocked and immobile. Just because we're family doesn't mean she can just take someone's wallet. What kind of mentality is that? Realizing this was beyond something I could handle alone, I decided to talk to Jack about it.
Jack, I'm really concerned about Anne lately. Today, she just took my wallet and left the room because she wanted money to go out.
Jack ignored me as if he hadn't heard a word.
And she demanded $600 to go out. Isn't that too much for a middle schooler for just one outing?
Then Jack glared at me.
If Anne says she needs that much for going out, then that's probably what she needs.
Just give it to her.
But $600 is a lot of money. It's not something you can just hand over so easily.
As we argued, and came out of her room, apparently having heard everything.
Are you still talking about that?
She was approaching me with a smug, unpleasant grin.
Well, you're just a homemaker with no money, right? All my friends' moms work, so they have money at home. We don't because of you. Being just a homemaker these days, what are you even thinking?
Then, both of them pointed at me and said,
Useless people who don't work should get out. Stop being a parasitic mom right now.
I felt something snap inside me upon hearing this.
Understood.
I realized there was no need to stay with people who treated me with such contempt. Then, Jack stood in front of me, waving a piece of paper.
Hey, you're forgetting this. This is why clueless homemakers are no good.
The paper was a divorce form. He approached me, waving the divorce papers.
You should do things properly, it's common sense.
Without hesitation, I put it in my bag.
I'll file this at the city court myself. It's wrong to bother you when you're so busy. Let me handle this at least. Don't tell me you're planning to not file it and just keep it like that. Of course not. Besides, the submission of a divorce form will be notified you. There's no way for me to deceive.
Jack seemed convinced by my words, glanced at me, and went into his room. For me, I couldn't bear the thought of considering someone who treated me so terribly as my husband. Driven by that thought, I left the house and immediately headed to the city court. Filing the divorce papers was straightforward and quick. I wished I had done it sooner, considering how easy it was. For now, I decided to move forward. I went straight to the neighboring town after filing the divorce papers. Amelia lived there, and she welcomed me immediately after hearing my situation. She handed me several bank cards.
It's good that I kept these for emergencies. Indeed. It's scary to think what would have happened if I had brought these into my marriage with Jack.
I had entrusted my bank cards to Amelia when I got married.
I've been married once too, and I know people change when they see a lot of money. Money you work hard for is the only kind that has real value. That's right. The trouble you had in your previous marriage was over this money. Yes. That's why I didn't want you to go through the same thing, Aubrey. I'm glad I insisted on keeping it.
Actually, we sisters had always been interested in money, working together to increase our wealth. We were fascinated by how to grow money efficiently and effectively. We tried every method to increase wealth, experimenting with various approaches. Besides asset management and investments, we also ventured into blog management, crowdsourcing, and entrepreneurship. After finishing my casual sales clerk job or during my free time as a homemaker, I enjoyed the thrill of watching my money grow. Before I knew it, my assets had exceeded $22 million, surprising even myself. But at the time of my marriage to Jack, what to do with the painstakingly accumulated $22 million became a source of worry. It's often said that people change when they see a lot of money. Even though Jack was a wonderful man, the thought of how he might change upon seeing this money was terrifying. At the time of our marriage, I had asked Amelia for a favor. The profit we made from our combined efforts was always supposed to be split equally between us, a firm promise since the time we started collaborating on investments and asset management.
Since you left home after getting married, I've been managing your share. Please check the bank accounts.
Thank you. It was a great decision to ask Amelia. If seeing big money, no, even if not from seeing big money, some people change just by getting married. That's why I said it, remember? It's better to keep quiet about having money for a while, even after getting married. I had kept secret the fact that I had been working on various projects with my twin sister and increasing our money. People might betray you in the end, but money never does. So true. I'm glad I took Amelia's advice. Amelia's advice turned out to be beneficial in ways I never imagined. Even though I was just working on small things at home as a homemaker, thanks to Amelia's efforts, we generated more profits than I expected. A year later, the amount increased even more, making me almost scream with joy.
It took a long journey to increase it to this extent. Indeed. Thanks to all Amelia did. Oh, stop, you're making me blush. By the way, Aubrey, I have something to consult with you.
Then, Amelia showed me an email.
A financial magazine wants to feature us. It's a women's finance magazine, and they want to hear about our journey of increasing wealth through asset management and work-from-home projects. Oh, I sometimes read that magazine. It's amazing we've been featured in it, being amateurs. Really. I never imagined we'd be featured when we started working together. So, we're okay to accept, right? Of course.
We later gave an interview, and our responses were published in the magazine. It was unbelievable to see us featured in a magazine section. For privacy, our faces were blurred and initials used, so it wasn't immediately obvious it was about us. A few weeks after the magazine went on sale, I started receiving dozens of calls from the same number. It should have been hard to recognize us just from that content alone. Counting the calls, there were 20 from Jack and Anne. Initially, I ignored them, but one day, out of curiosity, I answered, and Jack immediately started speaking in a pressing tone. "Hey, you're the one in that magazine, aren't you, Aubrey?
What are you talking about? Is this how you start a conversation with your ex-wife? I know, because we were married for years, or rather, because we truly loved each other, there are things you just understand."
While I thought his abrupt call and absurd claims were typical of him, I decided to make things clear.
"Just so you know, we are strangers now since we're divorced. Please refrain from leaving dozens of calls, it's quite intimidating." Intimidating? That's an exaggeration. I just want to talk to my loving wife. Wife? We're divorced, remember?
Jack yelled over the phone.
Can't believe you took that joke seriously? I'm done dealing with someone like you who can't take a joke.
Jack blurted out unbelievably.
Marrying a failure like you and suffering mentally? I haven't forgotten that. I'll make sure you pay me a hefty alimony for that.
I couldn't let this slide and decided to fight back.
Alimony? To you? No way. Have you forgotten that it's you who should be paying alimony?
What do you mean by that?
You might think I haven't noticed, but I know all about it. You were having an affair with a temp worker at your office.
I could picture him getting flustered over the phone. His voice was getting higher.
What? An affair? What are you talking about? Stop making things up. I'm telling you now, I had you investigated before our divorce. You were out there having affairs while pretending to be on business trips. You've got some nerve living life so calmly as if nothing happened. What are you gonna do now, investigating me? Don't tell me you're talking about getting alimony from me.
Jack kept on ranting like a yapping puppy.
Don't worry, I didn't get this info to squeeze every last penny out of you. I have more meaningful uses for it. Meaningful? What are you planning to do with it?
Who knows? Oh, I hear Anne's voice over the phone. Can I talk to her? I could hear Anne's lethargic voice on the other end. They must have thought I'd cave in and give them a chunk of money. I could overhear them saying, "It's her money, I deserve a share." I decided to talk to Anne. "Long time no see, and sorry I couldn't give you much allowance back then."
Don't worry about it, Mom. I was so happy to see you featured in that famous magazine.
And, unlike Jack, was trying to sweet-talk me. It was typical of her, but I wasn't going to be swayed by her tactics.
Seems like you've been promoting me all over. Of course. I'm proud of my mom. Really? So who was pretending to be my daughter, writing all sorts of nonsense on forums and social media?
What are you talking about? And acted as if she knew nothing.
No use playing dumb. I had everything checked by a lawyer. If you doubt me, I can read it out loud right here.
I decided to read out some of the forum posts.
You can't say these things seeing in my eyes, can you? Well, that's all those lies about me being greedy, involved in illegal money, being chased by dangerous people. You've got quite the imagination.
And seemed flustered but continued.
Well, you probably thought you wouldn't get caught using a pseudonym. You've got to own up to your actions. Who do you think you are, talking about responsibility? I'm a minor, and this is just a family dispute. Threatening me is pointless.
Seeing she didn't get it, I thought it best to just hang up.
Anyway, I'm entitled to some of your money. Just transfer it to my account. I'll handle the rest here.
I was appalled by their complete lack of remorse over the phone, but that deep sense of disgust somehow made me feel liberated. I decided to take action without hesitation. Thinking this way, I decided to take action. I informed a mutual acquaintance of Jack, someone I met through work, about his numerous affairs. I also sent screenshots of the forum posts and had made to her school. I included a letter stating my intention to report to the police, so I'm sure some action will be taken. Word travels fast, and people who heard my story or read the letter were shocked, spreading the rumors even quicker. Thanks to these rumors, Jack's chances of advancement at his job were destroyed, as everyone at work became aware of his affairs. Anne's nearly confirmed recommendation for advanced studies was cancelled, leaving her in a state of panic. Known schoolwide for her embarrassing forum posts, her friends quickly distanced themselves, leaving her to spend her days alone. One day at the supermarket, I ran into Jack and Anne. They looked nothing like they used to.
Hey, you think you're better than us just because you're rich?
What are you talking about? And why are you ambushing me here?
You did it, didn't you? You're the one who spread the word about my affairs at work. And because of you, Anne's recommendation fell through.
Their approach was full of the desperation of people who had nothing left to lose. It seemed they had been keeping tabs on my family's house.
You've messed everything up. You should have just kept quiet and given us the money. I always wanted to have a good relationship with you two as a family, but you're the ones who ruined it. Don't blame others for your mistakes. You just keep talking back. Who do you think you are?
While being astonished at their words, I responded. Considering everything that's happened, including today's incident, maybe I should talk to the police.
There are limits to what can be tolerated, even with ex-family.
And if this continues? Mentioning the police made Jack and Anne awkwardly look down. Do you really want to escalate this further and involve the police? Realizing they had no other options, they walked away. Since my divorce, I've been working with Amelia on managing our assets. In hindsight, I'm really glad I never told Jack about my total assets of $22 million. Just thinking about what might have happened if I had been completely honest with Jack and gives me a headache. Recently, Amelia and I have been excited about starting a new company. I've heard there are women who want to divorce but can't due to financial issues. I'm thinking of starting a school that can support women like them, helping them build skills from home. I hope to be a support for people struggling with family relationships, unable to take the first step, just like I did. My name is Helena Turner, and I'm 30 years old. My mother is a jewelry designer, so I manage her store, Jewelry Palace. My husband, John, is 32 years old. He's set to be the next president of our family-run company, Turner Corporation. John and I have completely opposite personalities. But we mesh well together, and have never fought once in our 5 years of marriage. We started fertility treatments 2 years ago. John's company is run by his father and his 2 uncles, but John is the only male heir. John's presidency seems likely to happen sooner than we thought. The expectation turned towards me to bear an heir. One day, I was contacted by a woman claiming to be John's mistress, Wilma. She suddenly declared that she was pregnant with John's child. "I'm going to inherit both John's genes and his fortune," she boasted. I coolly replied, "Then you'll be inheriting his AIDS too, huh?"
What?
She was momentarily speechless, but then said,
"I've known about John having AIDS for a while now."
This was an unexpected turn. It seemed like a game of wits was about to begin.
"How do you know about John's AIDS? Did he tell you?"
"That's impossible. I know everything about John. We've been together for about a year. I'm carrying the baby he's longed for, which means I'm the winner now."
The Turner Corporation is a family business, meant to be passed down to blood relatives. He's going to be the young president.
His duty doesn't end there. He should have a male heir to continue his legacy. You've had a hard time with the fertility treatments for 2 years, Helena. I've heard it's tough mentally and physically. But that's all in the past now. I'm going to give birth to John's child and be recognized as the rightful successor. Fine by me. But we'll be doing a DNA test. If it turns out to be John's child, I'll step aside. I married John with full awareness of these conditions, including the need to have a child. If your baby is really John's, I'll have to reconsider my position. So, let's do the DNA test and prove it. I'm actually relieved that a child is on the way. Oh, how embarrassing for you. Trying so hard for 5 years and getting nowhere. It's finally my time. I've become the woman needed by the Turner family. So, you'll be divorcing John, right? Your role is over now. Just leave him and the house. Hearing Wilma's voice for the first time, I could tell she was in her mid-20s, but she lacked intelligence in her speech. I couldn't believe John would fall for someone like her. But if John has AIDS, won't it affect the child? We need to do thorough testing, including for that. As you know, John is in line to become the next president. If you're going to have a successor, it needs to be healthy. John's parents will insist on exhaustive tests. Have you checked if you're infected with AIDS? Well, you're really optimistic and mentally strong. Normally, when a husband's mistress suddenly shows up and says she's pregnant with his child, most wives would get furious. But you're not even flustered. Did you know about me? If John could live so carefree without getting flustered in front of you, then I gotta say, I see him in a new light. Honestly, I had a hunch that John had a mistress. After hearing John had AIDS, I thought it was a one-time thing from a fling. In our family environment, where getting flustered doesn't cut it, I tried to convince myself it was okay for him to have a mistress or two. Since he got a mistress, John seemed unsettled and constantly trying to please me. So, you don't really love John, do you? I heard from him it was a marriage of convenience. Otherwise, why would someone as outgoing as you marry him? John's a quiet man who spends his free time reading. I can't imagine you two building a comfortable home together. Our marriage did start off like a formal arrangement. John, shy and earnest, was more intriguing to me than any other man I'd met. Our marriage wasn't just for the sake of our families, though it was beneficial for both. But John and I proudly say it's a love marriage. Do you want to hear something interesting? Oh, but this might hurt you. Still, you have the right to hear John's true feelings. Ready? Regardless of my response, you're going to tell me anyway, aren't you? Are you ready for this? Are you prepared to hear it? Wilma teased, then started playing a recording of John. Helena is from a different world than mine. She should be with a man who takes her to parties or rides around in fancy convertibles. Someone sociable and charismatic. Not a boring guy like me who spends nights reading in a corner. I always wonder why a bright and glamorous woman like Helena would date a loner like me. I always feel inferior. Always trying to gauge her mood. Not that Helena is always in a bad mood. She smiles and greets me every morning. But seeing her smile, I sometimes think this is all a dream. Even after 5 years of marriage, I still get nervous around her. Walking outside or entering a restaurant, I feel like everyone's staring at Helena and wondering who the unremarkable guy next to her is. I guess it was just a coincidence that she was single at that time, and she settled for a marriage arranged by her parents. I had no idea John felt that way. I love watching him read. And I try not to disturb him. It must have been hard for him, living like that. I can't blame him for seeking comfort in a slightly offbeat woman like Wilma. See? Living in fear of you, how could he be happy? It's only natural he'd find a mistress. You have no right to complain. I just met you today, but I'd like to know more about you, especially since you're carrying the heir to the company. Upon my request, Wilma began talking about how she met John. It'll be due back in a week. Wilma worked at a library John frequented. He found peace surrounded by books. You're always here at this time, aren't you? Wilma casually struck up a conversation. You're not employed?
I'm just taking a long lunch break.
This led to daily greetings between the two. I was surprised to think that a patron is the future president of a major advertising agency.
Huh? How did you know that?
Your name is on the library card, right? You always dress well, wearing expensive suits and shoes. So, I did a little online search and found your company's website. Despite your quiet demeanor, you're going to be the president. You must be really competent. That's very attractive in a man.
Well,
John blushed, unaccustomed to such compliments. Your ties always look stylish too, right? Branded but not too flashy.
Yeah, my wife always picks them out for me.
You're married? But you're not wearing a ring?
I take it off during work. It distracts me, and I can't focus. My wife's a bit upset about it. Her mom's a jewelry designer. My wife used to aspire to be one too, and she designed our wedding rings. She worries I might lose it someday because we can't replicate the exact design.
You really come alive when you talk about your wife. She must be wonderful. I'm kinda jealous. John pretended not to hear and dodged Wilma's comment. She was at the peak of her jealousy. She had thought he was single. A little search and there he was, introduced as the future president of a fairly big company. A chance like this doesn't come often. I won't give up just like that. I've finally found my prince. Wilma did something a bit naughty.
What?
John was surprised on the phone. Surprised?
Yeah.
I wanted to surprise you.
How did you get my phone number?
I saw it on the library card.
Is that okay? That's personal information. You shouldn't do that, it's wrong.
You're really honest. You even button up your shirt all the way to the top.
Oh, yeah.
Wilma laughed, and John chuckled too. This was indeed the moment when John's heart was swayed.
I appreciate the call, but it's time for me to head home. It's a bit awkward.
Are you worried about your wife? Do you guys share a bedroom? Like, sleep in a double bed together?
2 doubles.
Wow, rich people are different. Having a bedroom big enough for 2 double beds.
Yeah, my wife's in the bathroom now, but I don't think it's right to be talking to another woman.
You're scared, huh? So, when can we talk on the phone and meet up?
Huh? Why are we heading in that direction?
Because we're friends.
Friends.
John trusts people too easily. That's why he's been swindled and cheated in business. Could you change your library visit to 2 p.m. starting tomorrow? That's when my break is. Then we can chat a lot at a cafe or restaurant.
Do you enjoy talking with me?
Yeah, I do. I want to know more about you.
But you're still young, right? I'm already over 30, so I might be bored with you. You have low self-esteem. Let's be more positive. You seem like a different person compared to when you're at the library.
Well, that's just a facade for work.
Oh, my wife's out of the bathroom. I gotta hang up.
John thought he was just friends with Wilma, but he ended the call worrying about me. At that moment, he must have known he was doing something wrong. Then, John and Wilma started having lunch during her break time. Wilma became more and more demanding. Hey, how much disposable income do you have? As a future president, it must be a lot, right? I want more time with you. Could you rent a place for us? It doesn't have to be a fancy apartment, a studio is enough. I just want a space for just the two of us. Normally, anyone would understand this as wanting to be a mistress. But John hadn't thought that deeply. To him, Wilma was like a new, exciting person. John rented a studio apartment for Wilma, and they began spending more time there. Wilma leaned on John to the fullest. And she was quite clever about it. Hey, John, what's your wife like?
The opposite of you, Wilma.
If I remember correctly, she works at a jewelry store, right? She's an independent woman. Yeah, I think she's cool. But you're capable too, Wilma. Getting a librarian's certification is tough, right? You've got a career and a future planned. It's not that big a deal. I just didn't want to work in a large organization and looked for a job in a smaller setting. That's why I became a librarian. I don't really like books, though. They make me sleepy. Such casual conversations might have been comforting for John, considering he felt uneasy with me. So, John and Wilma's affair went on for 6 months without my knowledge. But with Wilma's pregnancy, it was time for a three-way conversation. I prepared a secret plan and went to John and Wilma's love nest. I found John lounging in sweats, a sight he never showed at home.
Helena. Why?
Wilma is pregnant, right? We need to talk about what to do next.
No, it's not what you think this is.
If you divorce John, the problem will be solved quickly. What do you want to do, John?
I think a life we've been blessed with should be cherished.
What about the AIDS issue? What if the baby is infected?
We'll get tested properly.
So, we're heading towards divorce, right? John fell silent. John's indecisiveness was evident even in this situation. Hey, did you tell Helena about having AIDS? We heard the test results together. John had a high fever and we weren't sure if it was a cold or the flu, so we went to the hospital. That's where we did the blood test and found out it was early-stage AIDS. Since then, John's been on medication to suppress the onset. By the way, I tested negative. Did you get tested for AIDS, Wilma? Even if you didn't, I know your results. John, do you know what Wilma does for a living?
She works at a library.
That's her daytime persona. At night, she's working at a nightclub.
What? Wilma, is that true?
Listen, John. You got AIDS from Wilma. She contracted it while working in the sex industry and passed it on to you without saying anything. Got it?
What? What's that all about?
If everything's out in the open, no point in hiding it. Yes, that's right. I thought if John got AIDS, Helena would leave him. That's why I had unprotected sleep with him.
That's unbelievable.
But now, having AIDS doesn't mean death. I'm on medication too. And another thing, you're not pregnant, are you? What basis do you have to say that? You just want to believe that because you couldn't get pregnant. You're just jealous. That's a low way to lead the conversation. A friend of Wilma's mother, a regular customer at my store, spilled everything. She showed me the email exchanges as evidence. Can you still be so confident? Actually, a regular customer at my store was the mother of Wilma's friend. When Wilma's friend came to buy an engagement ring and saw my name, she realized I was the wife of the man Wilma was having an affair with. Feeling sorry for John and me, she betrayed Wilma and showed me the emails. She was so disgusted by Wilma's double life that she wanted to cut ties with her. I'm so frustrated with him, he's so indecisive. But he doesn't interfere much and mostly reads books, so he's harmless. My plan was to get into the Turner family by manipulating him. I infected him with AIDS to make Helena leave him. Then it's just a matter of marrying him. Claiming to be pregnant seemed the fastest way. Doesn't matter if I'm really not pregnant. I can just say I had a miscarriage after we're married. Fooling him is easy. I want to be a wealthy wife, living a life of leisure. Have a maid for housework, enjoy spas and nail salons. Once I marry him, I'm set for life. What a great catch he was. He's so gullible, believes everything, never doubts or denies anything I say. I might be able to move into his penthouse soon. Here I am in this tiny studio, and there's Helena, living in luxury. It'll be easy to take her down a peg. A wedding? Oh, I'll make it grand. You'll be invited. Look forward to it. John's expression darkened rapidly. Even he, as oblivious as he was, must have realized he was being used. So what? I'll use any means to get what I want. You were after John's background from the start, weren't you?
So, you're not pregnant?
Not right now. But John, we can try, right? I'm only 25. I can easily have 3 or 5 more kids. John's company requires a male heir, right? So, it's a no-go for the future too. I'm confident I can give birth to a healthy heir. We've been doing infertility treatments for 2 years, but it's on hold now because of John's AIDS. They said it almost certainly won't affect the baby, but it's not 100%. We were waiting to see how John's treatment goes. John, don't you have anything to say? Wilma deliberately infected you with AIDS. I see it as punishment for betraying Helena. I have brought it on yourself. I felt crushed under the pressure of having to produce an heir. Indeed, after 5 years of marriage without a child, infertility was a possibility. That's why I underwent IVF and artificial insemination. It was physically and mentally tough, and the despair when implantation didn't happen. And then, John getting AIDS, why should I bear all this burden? Helena, I'm sorry. Really sorry. John, now we can be together openly. We can hold hands outside, come home to the same house, no need to sneak around anymore. Helena can live on her own, but I only have you, John. You grew up in a wealthy family, never struggling for money. Then you chose a rich husband. What's the thinking behind that? Do rich people marry each other to maintain their lifestyle or because they share similar values? What's the point of marriage? You don't cook, rely on a housekeeper for chores, it's easy for you. And Helena, you always seem so condescending. Sure, you live a celebrity life, but do you realize how you look down on nightclub workers? I don't discriminate based on occupation, but let's be honest, working in the industry isn't exactly normal. I mean, if your daughter said she was becoming a sex worker, could you honestly be happy? Proudly announce it to friends and relatives? You can say that because you're rich. Is it so wrong for those who have less to lean on those who have more? At the very least, you lied and deceived, didn't you? Even after reading that shocking email, John still chooses Wilma? Then let me deliver the final blow. The emails your friend leaked weren't the only ones. I can show you the rest right here. Wilma clearly became nervous, her eyes darting around. She obviously didn't want that content to be heard. It might be troublesome. I have AIDS, right? And I might have passed it to a client, who could sue me, along with his wife. The husband goes to a nightclub because he doesn't want his wife, and then when he gets AIDS, she suddenly shows up. Don't you think that's pathetic? A lawsuit? I'm not scared at all. The client knew the risks. Doesn't his wife feel embarrassed? Her husband got AIDS from someone. That's something an old lady would do. It's so annoying to be an old lady. Wilma seems to be spreading AIDS, but is she getting proper treatment? She seems to be living recklessly, involving others in her situation. So, Helena, why did you come here today? To show me the emails between me and my friend? That's a pretty weak weapon for storming into your lover's place. Oh, right, that was my main purpose for coming today. Here, this. I handed John the divorce papers. All it needs is your signature. I'll file it at the lawyer's office immediately. This is what you and Wilma wanted, right? But, John and Wilma, you'll be paying me a fair amount in alimony, thank you very much. Wait, Helena! Stop with the divorce and alimony talk. Please! What? After indulging in your desires and getting AIDS from your mistress, who would want to stay with you for life? I thought John would confess the truth when he was diagnosed with AIDS. It was obviously contracted through sexual intercourse with another woman. But John never mentioned it. I waited, hoping he would be honest. If he had confessed then, I might not have considered divorce. But now, it's too much. A kind lie isn't kind. It's different. I was deceived at the beginning. We went out for dinner, then drinks one night. I got so drunk, I blacked out. When I woke up, I was in a hotel bed with Wilma beside me. I panicked because I really didn't remember anything. Then Wilma started crying. I thought she took the morning after pill, so I was relieved. Then she said she was pregnant. It was supposed to be good news, I wanted kids too. But thinking it would be the end with Helena,
I didn't know the best way to handle it. I just kept going with Wilma aimlessly.
You've had quite the life, going back and forth between your main and secondary homes. Enjoy your life with Wilma. I'm gladly giving John to you.
Let's have a proper conversation, Helena. You're too emotional right now to make a calm decision. Let's cool down and talk later. Divorce isn't the best option.
Wait, John, what do you mean?
Helena is saying she wants a divorce. That should be great for you.
I'm perfectly calm. No matter what twist happens, I have no intention of getting back with John. Just imagine the loss for Turner Corporation. I forcefully got John to sign the divorce papers and headed straight to the lawyer's office. Wilma is truly a terrifying woman. John's one mistake. It was made without memory, leading to claims of AIDS and pregnancy. A sincere man like John would naturally choose to take responsibility. But his inability to tell me the truth might have been due to fear. John apparently confessed everything to his parents and relatives, but the consequences were severe. My mother introduced clients to Turner Corporation. She couldn't forgive what happened to her daughter and publicly denounced them. The corporation lost clients and eventually fired and cut ties with John. After the incident, the company changed its management policy, no longer fixating on male successors and allowing women to take active roles. John, penniless and cast out, moved into Wilma's studio. But for Wilma, a penniless John was no longer useful.
Wilma, are you still working in that industry?
I can't, I have AIDS. I'm working at a spa now.
Did you quit the library? You're so annoying, John. It's so boring being with you. I don't need a life of licking each other's wounds. I have no attachment to a broken, jobless John. Get out.
John, in a daze, wandered aimlessly. Rumor has it he became homeless. Wilma, despite her bravado, is likely struggling with the fear of death that AIDS brings. I returned to my family home, resuming my pursuit of becoming a jewelry designer under my mother's guidance. I had seriously considered this career in college but had given it up. Now, I'm starting over, chasing my dream once again.